Welcome to this week's Tin Dog podcast, normally recorded live in front of a cat. Before I start this week's review, I think I'll start by going over some stuff from last week. Of course, remember that there's always the MySpace Tin Dog podcast group, which you can reach by activating your normal MySpace account, going to groups, which is one of the options along the top, and add groups. The group's called Tin Dog. There you go. You type that in, you search, we're there. We've got about 20 members so far, 28 members in fact. Feel free to join, feel free not to join, choice is yours. Also on Podcast Alley, if you've got the urge to vote for me, or vote for the show rather than me, it's not a popularity competition, obviously, I have 3 votes. Oh yes, 3. And of course there's always just leaving a review on iTunes, if the mood takes you. Of course, if you just want to email me, as a couple of people have done, my address, as always, is tin, or dash, choice is yours, tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk, not .com. Not .com? Leave it there. So, I would also like to apologise for last week's show being a bit drab on the grounds that I was remarkably tired when I recorded it. Oh, we could also have some sort of news section this week, but as most of you have already bought the copy of Doctor Who Monthly or subscribed to Outpost Gallifrey, telling you stuff you already know is kind of pointless. Similarly, I won't bother telling you the schedule for this week's Doctor Who on the grounds that you know it's on next week. Now, last week's show, obviously I'll do a bit of an update before I go into this week's review of Blink. I am sorry I sounded a bit sleepy, but this week I am a little bit more healthy, which is good. Now, 2 things that I forgot to cover. The first one is the Rebecca Hayes / Rebecca Stevenson thing. When did she change her name? When did I get the memo? Obviously, I'm not a member of some sort of spaced group, so if someone could email me and tell me what happened, I'm suspecting she got married, but there's not a lot of actresses change their name because they got married. Is she trying to reinvent herself? Because let's face it, every review you've heard this week of the show has just been, well, we liked Rebecca Stevenson. So has it gone on? Or perhaps she's changed it so that she doesn't sound like a member of the Stevenson-Connolly clan. I just don't know. But does this mean that we've got Nick Frost lined up for the 2009 season? Almost makes you think, but not quite. And of course, the one thing that I didn't mention in the last show, but I did do on the little MP3 cover picture, was the most obvious thing about last week's show. Now, a few people had mentioned were the family of blood Rutans, shape changes, they glow green, they can communicate, perhaps they were Rutans that weren't involved. It's a nice thought, largely unlikely, but you never know. If someone wanted to run for it, I'm sure you could slide it in there as canon. The thing I really needed to talk about, however, was Wurzel Gummidge. Yes, Wurzel Gummidge. The popular, if mostly scary, kids show with the Crowman, Geoffrey Bayldon, who was by far the best actor never to play the Doctor. Now, everyone knows it's Jon Pertwee playing the part of Wurzel Gummidge, but if you think about it, these are scarecrows with interchangeable heads that look a bit like a certain Time Lord we know, i.e. the Third Doctor. Has some of the Doctor's essence got into the scarecrow food chain? Eventually, after several reincarnations or rebuildings, the life force that brought the scarecrows to life has taken on certain Time Lord characteristics. Has this made Wurzel Gummidge canon? I'm sure you're all willing to discuss this, or indeed just take the mick. Right, this week I'm going to be talking about Blink. Well, you already know that. Let's face it, you watched the show. However, I didn't watch it when it was on because I was at work. So, very nicely, I get out of work quite late on, drive home, and watch Blink in bed just before I go to sleep. Yes, that's a really sensible move, isn't it? I'm going to watch something a tiny bit scary. That won't give me nightmares at all. And to be fair, it didn't. It did give me nightmares, however, on Sunday night. When I woke up and the cat was in silhouette as I opened my eyes at 3 o'clock in the morning and suddenly became terrified that the angels were coming to get me. Oh yeah, this story gets into your head. But of course, as always, I'm ahead of myself. There are words that really should frighten Doctor Who fans, and double banking ranks almost with hiatus for words that really should put the willies up people. For those of you who aren't aware, double banking basically means making 2 episodes when you really should be spending all your effort making 1 episode. It means that there's 1 episode per season these days that are light on the ground when it comes to having the Doctor in them. Last season it was, and I don't like using these words a lot, Love and Monsters. Oh, I'm sorry, I feel a little ill. And this season it was, of course, Blink. Now, of course, last season we had the Peter Kay guest star comedy episode. Alright, it was a comedy and it had a bit of a heartfelt thing, and it did have some extraordinarily inappropriate lines about a type of love life. I'm sorry, I'm having flashbacks. You see, I was prepared to love Love and Monsters before it was on. I knew everyone was uptight. I was prepared. I was so willing to love it. I was willing to suspend my disbelief. It felt, for all the world, like a Virgin New Adventure. You know, it was a Doctor Who story without the Doctor in it very much. But I didn't love it. It was just a monster. Everyone's aware of the feelings about it. Let's not go there. Let's not dredge over old ground. This was not Love and Monsters. This was Blink. This was its own creature. They got the guy who wrote the best story of last season, Clockwork. Ah, yes, The Girl in the Fireplace, to write this story. And it was very, very well done. There are 2 things that Doctor Who does well, and one of them's comedy and one of them's horror. They'd tried comedy with Love and Monsters, so let's try outright comedy. Now, the show is always said to have an infinite amount of potential when it comes to storylines, which I guess it does. But then again, once you remove certain key pieces, it's a bit like Kaplunk. You pull out the wrong peg and everything comes crashing down, and one of the pegs, however, for Doctor Who, is to have the Doctor in it. But something even worse happened this time. We started to realise that, it's not me who realised this obviously, other people have mentioned it, that the best stories of this season are the stories that haven't had the Doctor in them. But then again, that's because they're examining what it is to be the Doctor, and to do that you need to step back a little bit. This was a great story. I'm not moaning. I'm genuinely not moaning. Part of me wishes that they would just make 12 episodes instead of 13, not stress themselves too thin, but if they did that, we wouldn't have this little gem, and that's what it is. It's a gem. Of course, we still have 3 episodes left, so we're not even saying that the best has been. Oh, one thing I am grateful about this story, though, is that there was no Saxon reference. None at all. It was a modern-day story, no reference whatsoever to the ongoing theme. The only thing that I need to say about Saxon, Harold Saxon, is that Harold, the king, was the last of the Saxon kings of England who defended against the alien invaders who were the French. So has the name just been taken because it's the man defending England against the invaders from another country, stroke another world? It makes logical sense for someone to choose a name like that. There were also lots of moments for the fans. For example, things that were fairly postmodern, like Sparrow and Nightingale being mentioned as a TV show, but only on ITV, and that kind of leads you to think about Rosemary and Thyme, Randall and Hopkirk Deceased, which is a nice show, one of my personal favourites, again remade by the BBC, so not quite only on ITV, Dempsey and Makepeace, and of course, the reason I bring this up, Sapphire and Steel. This was a very Sapphire and Steel story. Time was almost a creature in the episode. It had an essence, it had a reason for the story being there. Now, the problem is, for me, the creatures themselves were more... They were there to serve the plot. The actual quantum, you can't see them, they can't move thing. I know the Doctor says they're the loneliest creatures in the universe, and they date from the time before time, which, to be fair, seems to be a very, very overpopulated place with vampires and lions and tigers and bears and arachnos. But let's not let's not be picky on that one. What? I was looking at the angels, and I suddenly went, okay, they can't look at each other, so mating and reproduction's odd, but they're made of stone, so does that make them related to the ogre? But then again, how do they mate? How do they reproduce? And then something even more basic applied to me. If you can't see each other, obviously use touch. Where do they get their clothes from? Because nobody's going to look at them in order to measure them and then make clothes out of what appears to be what they're made from. Let's leave it there. I mean, to be fair, most kids are going to go on holiday to Spain or Greece or Paris or France or somewhere like that and experience a mime artist pretending to be a statue that's just going to mess with their head more than seeing an ordinary statue in the street, because these ones actually do move and they will follow you. Is Stephen Moffat just frightened of holiday locations? I just don't know. Oh, the story itself is heavily influenced by one of Stephen Moffat's own pieces of work. I don't know if you're aware of this, but in the last Doctor Who annual, 2006, What I Did on My Christmas Holidays by Sally Sparrow, written by the same author, appears there. I will put the link on the show notes on iTunes. Of course, with the possible exception of the windows being the wrong size, which has been an ongoing thing for TARDIS rebuilders and Doctor Who fans, the show didn't reference its own history as much as it could have, and that's a good thing. It felt like a Sapphire and Steel story, and let's face it, we'd all watch Sapphire and Steel if it came back, especially if it was made as well as this. Not much of a review, to be fair. I loved the show. I can't doubt it. I can't pick holes in it as much as I would like to. It definitely was Love and Monsters, but part of me again still wishes that they just made 12 episodes in a Christmas special rather than 13 episodes, and you spend one episode going, is the Doctor in this? I'll leave it there and I'll speak to you next week. Be seeing you.